have to really start with how fundamentally powerful culture is, all forms of culture, including visual art, music, language.
We can rebuild buildings, we can rebuild bridges, we can rebuild schools, but if we do not incorporate our story, our art and our culture, our history.
A cultural framework. The theme for our community is community, culture, and commerce. And that's not just what Ashe says, that's what everybody says.
Part of the creative placemaking work is not about arts and culture on its own, but arts and culture as it is integrated in how we think of healthy communities.
What's important to you? What's important to me? How might we use arts and culture to advance our joint missions?
Hello everybody, we're ready to start the afternoon session. Thank you for still hanging in there with us. There's some great speakers and great projects we're going to be talking about, and all things that we can look to our own community to embrace. Many of you know our next speaker, but she would not brag about herself, so everybody knows I talk all the time, so I'm here to do that. Charlene Beckett is our Main Street Program Director. She has been a Program Director for over 20 years. She has done some amazing things in Abbeville. This is only one small sample of the project meant to embrace the community. It's Rouge Square, and the mural, it was this past Saturday at the farmers market for everyone to paint a small portion of, and then you got to sign as you painted it, so embracing the whole community. She has initiated the Daylily Festival, which is amazing. If you haven't come, first weekend in June, the Daylily Festival has started very small and now has thousands and thousands of people that come to the Daylily Festival. And there's so much more than Daylily, so be sure to come when you have a chance, first weekend in June. Without further ado, I will say that I think Charlene, it's hard to be a prophet in your own town, but I will say that she is an amazing Main Street manager, and as a community and as a parish, we're honored and happy to have her.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to be talking about is how the mural came about and what its purpose was, and how insane I was to even think that this could possibly happen. In the spring of 2017, I attended a Main Street meeting in Natchitoches, and the focus on the meeting was Project for Public Spaces. And it's, you know, a portion of creative placemaking. And so we were just introduced to a bunch of things. We were also asked to go walk on the street, and we had to survey the street and then come back and tell people what we thought about it. And so during this two-day workshop, they told us that there would be a grant available, a $4,000 grant, and the name of the grant is Lighter, Quicker, Cheaper, because they believe that, well, I'm gonna get to that. I'm gonna get ahead of myself. I'm not technical, so y'all have to. Okay, so the examples they showed us was that not, you know, I mean, you can spend a lot of money on projects and it doesn't meet the needs of the community. And so sometimes not a lot, you know, not spending a lot of money has transformed a community and has also spurred new businesses to happen. I went to Wisconsin, Milwaukee. I have to think about where I was. And this guy painted an empty parking lot that had been empty for probably 20 years, and he did all these kind of designs. You know, dominoes here, or hopscotch here, and you know, just different things. And so when you walk through the parking lot to get from the hotel to the shopping center, you had to walk through that. So people started gathering there. Then they started having music there. Then they started having pop-up stores that she talked about earlier, just in this empty parking lot. Well, what happened was someone bought the parking lot, and they were putting up like a 20 or 30-story building. Didn't happen overnight. But that's kind of the process and the emphasis of doing projects for public spaces. A lot of the things that you've seen in Lafayette has done it, where they do a little parklet in the street. They take up a parking spot and they just make it real creative. And so people start noticing it. They start sitting there. And sometimes those little parklets have grown and they're now used as public spaces. So I came back home and I said, now what can I do here? Well, Opelousas had done an art project and it was very successful. I had seen pictures. So I said, well, okay, we can do that. So we're going to paint, we're going to create a mural. It's going to be a paint by number mural, and we're going to have children paint it. So I wrote a grant. I was awarded the grant. I have two very good friends who are artists. I'm skipping the slide. You have to forgive me. I get ahead of myself. The thing about public spaces, what I wanted to say, referring to the mayor's conversation this morning, Pam McGray was our founder, and he knew how important public spaces were. And so when he purchased the land and divided it up into different properties, he saved the church square. He created a public space, which is Magdalen Square, which we all know and love. And he said, I'm going to donate this property to the community if you retain the square and you make one of those squares a government building. And that's where the courthouse is today. So back in 1845, before it was ever incorporated, he had the idea that public spaces were important in the heart of a community. So anyway, okay, now back to my story. So I wrote the grant. I was awarded the grant. Of course, you know, you do in the spring, you find out you're getting the money in November, you know, in November. And so I had this vision that we would create a mural that would tie into several things. Our festivals that we have downtown, and the fact that we're so lucky to have Robert Dafford paint so many murals in Abbeville. And so it's sort of like tying in. And what I think is kind of amazing today, as I was sitting in the audience, the sketch that I sent to the artist was drawn by a guy from France. And the guy, where is Kathy? Francois Garnier. I bought the picture from him many, many years ago. And so that's where my vision came from, is that I wanted to replicate that. Well, part of Project for Public Spaces and creating places for people to share memories and communicate with each other is not always about art. It's about amenities. So part of the grant paid for one of those black wrought iron tables and chairs that are now in Magdalen Square. And you have to, I have these bullet points. Part of the grant, part of creative placemaking is that you have to develop partnerships. You can't, you know, do it by yourself. And so, you know, I have a list of partnerships later. And don't let money stop you. That's what I think we heard from Carol earlier this morning. You know, it's just come up with a vision, figure out how you can get there, and it might take years, as the blacksmith shop is, can prove that. It's taken us like 10 years to get where we want to go. You just have to keep going and save money's not an object. Anyway, so paint the town mural. These are our partnerships. Of course, I couldn't have gotten the money without having a really good partnership with the Division of Historic Preservation, Main Street, the city, the Rebellion Arts Council, Root Square, which is an organization that just recently had a festival on Saturday to promote our ethnic cultures. which is another part of creative placemaking, the Tourist Commission, and the Farmers Market, and the Alameda Society. So all these people came together and we figured out, the mural's going to get done. We're probably going to paint the mural at the Farmers Market, and I have two really good friends who are artists, piece of cake. So we got this. I'm thinking smooth sailing, okay? Well, my two really good friends who are artists said, no way in hell am I doing that. Way too big. So I had a fabulous artist fall into my lap, actually, Megan Pearson-Bertrand. Megan, you want to stand up? I think they should know you by now, but graduated from McNeese in 2002. You have 5 children or 4?
5.
5 children, and the oldest one is?
Going to be 13 in August.
And the youngest one is?
3.
3. Wonderful mother, married to Trey Bertrand, a local guy, in 2004, and just recently became the Vermilion Arts Council president. And so she was invited to the meeting, and from there, it just, I don't even know how it happened. God put a hand in it because she agreed to sketch it out without even realizing how large it was going to be. So, this has been in her living room, these 3 blank panels. I even talked to George about how do you do these huge things, and he gave me some information, and Megan said, I got it, I'm going to do this. So that's the canvas stretched out over the plywood, and it stayed in your living room for how long?
I think a little over a month, and it survived 5 children.
Which is amazing. It would have been in my 6 months. I would have never gotten it done. So, oops. Okay, so anyway, she sketched it out. And do you want to share anything, Megan, about that?
I guess I was amazed at how little I had paid attention to the beauty of our buildings in town. You pass by them every day. You just don't see it. And I mean, I had no idea the detail, which is, a little painted over now, but the details that are just in the buildings and the beauty that we just don't take the time to appreciate, I guess, when you're in your day-to-day go. So that was something that I got from doing the mural. That was, and perspective drawing is not something I've done since college, so that was also an adventure, but I think it worked out in the end.
I forgot to mention why I chose Concord Street. Of course, the church, Father McGray, who founded our community, he was a Catholic priest, and so the church, everybody knows the church. But I chose Concord Street because it goes right into the courthouse. And it's also where most of our activities happen. If in the middle, on this panel, there is a black skillet. You can't really tell it's a black skillet just yet, but that's our omelet celebration. And so that's done in the middle of the street in front of the courthouse. And I just, I know that this is such an important part of our downtown, and it is actually beautiful, as is some other streets. So I thought, we're going to do Concord Street. And just from that picture that I bought from Francois. So other than having it sketched out, Odile and I went and spent the day with her, and we outlined everything. Now, I still don't know how all this is going to pan out. I'm not sure how I'm going to get it from Megan's house to downtown for the city workers to bring it to the square. But they were real troopers, and they, got it all done, and Megan's father braced it up and has it all fixed up where it's not going to fall over. So we put it in the square, and we had volunteers. Odile was really good about getting people all day scheduled to do volunteers. And so normally, I don't notice how many children show up for a farmer's market. So we'll never know if they came for the farmer's market or if they came to paint the mural. There were kids coming out from everywhere painting this mural. It's all numbered, and we had, as you can see on the right, these little white cups that had the different color paints. And so a child or an adult, because we had adults paint, they could go up and say, I want to paint the tree, or I want to paint the sidewalk. So this was another interesting thing that happened. We had more boys than girls painting, which was kind of interesting. So you could, you know, because it's so large, you could have at least 4 or 5 people painting at the same time. And there was face painting going on at the same time. And so a lot of the children they had to stand in line for the face painting. So it was like, I want to go paint, but I want my face painted, but I want to go paint. And so it was trying to figure out which one to do. It was an amazing day, and everybody had such a good time. So as you can see, it's filling up. The paint is getting there. We did have an artist come and paint part of the bank. I don't remember what his name was. Odile, do you remember?
His first name was Michael. I couldn't remember his last name.
I wanted to take his picture, and he kind of gave me a weird look, so.
But I did.
You did, okay. So, I mean, you know, we had the mayor painted a little piece on there, and we had some city workers who painted some things. And so, you know, this went from basically 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's filling up. And so Megan, who's such a wonderful person, made the little square at the bottom so that they could sign their name. I don't know that every person who painted on here signed their name, but I think it's really cool that we have that. And it looks great in this building, actually. That's it. That's it for my slide presentation. The question that I had so many people ask me was, what are you going to do with it now that it's completed? And I had no answer, because I didn't think that far. Because I didn't really know that all this was going to work out like it did. I didn't know that there would be so many people who enjoyed doing it and showed up to paint. So I'm open to suggestions. I know that it can be lent out for anybody who wants to use it as a backdrop for something. It's going to be available. And it will be polished up, right, Megan? Is there anything else you want to add to that? Any questions on the process or how we managed to do all this? Yes, Daniel.
Are you planning on having it sealed after it's all painted to protect the painting? Covered with a coating of some kind?
Yeah, probably. I did add that I'm the one that comes up with the idea, but I'm so not an artist. I had no idea. But yeah, that's a good suggestion.
I would suggest that when it's finished, that you take a picture and make it a postcard that you can sell for the city. I think it would be a great postcard. Even with the signatures on the bottom.
Yeah.
Listen, you can put it in the library for a while for everybody to see if you want.
Oh, that'd be great. That would be great. I think it's just a great, I mean, it was so exciting to see them
It's a great idea.
being so intense, painting who may have never picked up a paintbrush. And just, you know, they kept wanting, I think, wanting to go back. They paint a little bit and go do something and also wanted to go back. So I can't thank Megan enough and the volunteers who helped get this together. Anything else?
Charlene, has anybody asked if you're doing this again?
Lots of people. I've had lots of people say, let's do this again. And right now my answer is no. Just like I won't do a cookbook again, no. Today, no. Go ahead.
I want to say something. This highlights the beauty of the building, and as Megan said, so often it's taken for granted. You know, you don't notice the detail. But here again, I'd like to thank Charlene, because she was instrumental in getting facade grants, and that's why our Concord Street is as beautiful as it is today because of all the grants that she has gotten through the Main Street program. So thank you.
Thank you. Good one. I think I'm supposed to talk for another half hour. I'm not sure. Anything else?
Yeah, you have the paint, you can finish it.
You know, I honestly I was bringing the paint and the paintbrushes until I met with Abbey players. This is their set coming up, because that was the intention, is that after I did the little pictures everybody was going to get to paint. But I didn't want anything to happen to their set, because I do want to use this building again at another time. So, but that was part of it, is that they would have been able to paint.
Yeah, this would be a great set.
I know.
And an Abbeville play.
Yes, yes.
The famous play Our Town.
Yes, exactly. It'll be used once it's finished and maybe taken off the cardboard and I mean not the panels and what do you call it? Frames might not be so difficult to move back and forth. It will be in the cultural center. That's where it's going to be housed for the time being until we figure out what we're doing. Was I supposed to talk for another half hour?
No, keep going. I have.
Yes.
And this may not be appropriate, but it's on the general subject of public spaces. It's not the picture particular.
I'm sure you're going to have something good to say.
Hi, Charlene. Congratulations. This is fabulous. And by the way, Megan, I painted a little bit on the porch over the top. It made me realize how hard it is to stay in the line. And my first thing is I'm so amazed at how beautifully it turned out. It's not just a big mess.
I know.
With everybody painting all crooked and it's being horrible. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. Charlene, you were speaking earlier about public spaces and showing the pictures of everybody painting in the little bandstand or whatever you call it on the Mountain Square. Since they opened up the Midway restaurant and they have those nice windows shining out of the square, it really focuses the sense of beauty of that little space. The idea of having tables in the square where they serve coffee or beer or something, has that ever been explored?
We have 3 tables just recently. We purchased a table through the grant, and the Film Commission purchased a second table. But yes, I mean, we would like people do have lunch hour. They go and bring their food there. There are a lot of people that sit at the tables.
Are there prohibitions against that? I remember years ago when Mushmax, with Ike Funderburg's office, when they wanted to do a rooftop thing, and there was an existing city ordinance that you couldn't have outdoor dining for health reasons or something from way back in antiquity.
Is
it possible to have tables and outdoor stuff down there?
Yes, but it is a state highway. So if you just don't tell the state.
Okay. But that's kind of the limited thing.
Calvin's has tables outside on the sidewalk, and that's a state highway also.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know this, y'all gonna think I'm crazy, but I didn't know you couldn't walk around with a drink in your hand. But you can't do that, because I thought, well, just get a drink and go sit in the square. You can drink in the square, but you can't smoke in the square. But you can drink in the square, but you can't walk the street with alcohol. I didn't know that until I tried it one day.
So if you go across the street, get a cocktail and go sit over in the square.
In a styrofoam cup you can.
In a styrofoam cup that's covered.
Right. And you can drink in the square. I just, I let Calvin's one day, and it was like, no, come back. You can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious with the cultural center right there in the corner, the little restaurant, it's just so charming right there.
And our tourist commission has just moved into the cultural center, so that's an even bigger plus for us, So we do have the beautiful square, the beautiful public space, and the tourism office is there, and the Midway.
So everybody needs to go to the Midway and please find lunch or supper, because we need to keep that building open. We need to keep all our restaurants open, but that particular building is on a corner. Kathy?
They also have live music on Thursdays.
Yes.
And they try to do a lot of local musicians' live music.
And Kathy has live music also at the Sailbourne. Y'all haven't been there. Any other question?
So when it's going to be housed at the
Cultural Center.
Will people be able to go and paint?
No, it'll be completed.
Oh, it'll be completed.
It'll be completed.
When's the next presentation that you'll have where people can paint on it?
Never. It's going to be done.
So Megan's going to finish it.
Well, we'll help Megan finish it, but it's a one-time thing. And like I said, I would have liked y'all to paint it today, but it's a one-time thing, and it will be finished and sealed and on display. And I thank y'all so much, and I can't thank the volunteers enough for today and for this project.
So our next presenter, Bill Rodier, from St. Landry Parish Economic Development, will talk to us a little bit about him seeing the light of creative placemaking.
Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Come on, wake up just after lunch. Come on. So those of you that know Bill, Bill's Bill and knows Bill. So you're going to get Bill. I mean, this is for better, for worse, for other. I kind of share the notion that everybody has strengths to a fault. My strength to a fault probably is never losing sight of the bigger picture. And that doesn't often work well with governments, particularly governments in South Louisiana, and particularly governments in smaller, rural types of parishes. But I think you could say the same in Lafayette. As you can see, it's got a lot of challenges within the community of Lafayette. First of all, any elected officials in the room? I'm not going to be ugly towards elected officials, but I'm going to be honest, okay? Because I think we need to be honest about elected officials if this area is going to move forward. George has kind of converted me, I guess, to the theory of placemaking and how important it is, particularly in South Louisiana, with the importance of the cultural economy here in South Louisiana. My background, and I've been in economic development for a long time, is more, I guess that's where economic development probably started for most people, is more traditional. Recruiting the big businesses, creating jobs. What does that look like, creating jobs? Well, in St. Landry Parish, they think it's at the next Walmart distribution center with another 1,100 jobs. Unfortunately, there may be thousands of other economic development entities around the United States and even in other countries that are competing for those same types of projects. So economic development isn't all about creating jobs. In fact, the majority of my job, I would say 70%-ish, probably comes down to community development issues. And when I come and talk about community development issues, how can you not look at the importance of culture on our communities and influencing the decisions in our communities? There's some interesting things that are happening, not just here, but around the nation. We have a younger millennial generation that's looking for quality of life and where they relocate. Yeah, they want to make a good living. Yeah, we need employers to do that. But they want a quality of life, they want a flexibility in their work schedule, they want employers that understand that, and they want communities that understand that. So what might some of those things look like? Recreation opportunities, the opportunity to tie in with the culture, to be part of something bigger than them, to be part of a history, have a vibrant arts, entertainment, and the ability, when you move to another area, what's the biggest challenge you have when you move to another area? You want to be able to connect to people. You don't want to feel like you're in a bubble when you do that. Commonality and all those things, you guys see it. You've been talking about it for days, for those of you that have been a part of this for days. It's placemaking. I mean, that's what younger generations are looking for. What does it do? Destination entertainment, dollars from visitors outside the local marketplace. Sounds familiar, right? Small communities particularly, and we have these small communities around Acadiana, are on a dangerous path right now for many reasons. If you read from just about any study that I've seen, rural America in many ways is dying. If you look at the projections forward over the next 10, 20 and more years, people aren't relocating to rural communities. They're relocating to metro communities for many of the reasons that we just talked about. If rural communities don't see this and be progressive with this, which, by the way, I don't think they will without help, and that's where this conversation is headed, they can be in real trouble. And we have communities that are already in real trouble. Is anybody familiar with the community of Melville in St. Landry Parish? Anybody heard about that in Melville? They closed the ferry down in Melville, and Melville is literally in a desperate situation. That's an extreme example. But if we take a relatively short period of time, I don't think a lot of our communities, we have a number of communities that aren't too far behind some of the desperate situation that Belleville has with its funding and its circumstance. We have other pressures with the tax base on our local communities. Online sales. I was meeting with the general manager of the Walmart Distribution Center Thursday or Friday last week maybe. Anybody want to guess what percentage of sales Walmart does online right now today? Take a guess, anyone?
45.
45. Somebody said 45. 45%.
Compared to the store?
Their overall sales figures are 45% online. If you take their total gross sales figures, that's not going to go down. And that's just Walmart. Amazon, come on, Lord, Chewy.com. I mean, just go around the spectrum with this. What does that do? It's changing our retail environment. And changing our retail environment means we're not going to have as many brick and mortar stores. Not as many national retailers are going to look to relocate into communities. Not as much tax base is going to be available from those. More pressure on local government, right? Their tax base is going to continue to shrink. Their population is going to continue to shrink. So again, I'm leading to something that's going to tie in with this. If we're going to get beyond a traditional, what we viewed as a retail environment, shopping malls aren't, how many shopping malls do you read about closing almost daily? We have to create experiences for people to come. So we're leading towards that path towards placemaking and how this affects communities and how it should affect local governments. People want to go for more than just shopping, because I can get right on this thing and I can buy anything that I need now. I don't have to spend the gas, I don't have to spend the time, I don't have to find a parking spot, I can buy it right now. You got to give me something more than this computer to do that. Rural communities are small, obviously. Abbeville's small. The area in particular in St. Landry Parish that I'd like to talk about is the area, for those of you familiar, of our Sunset, Grand Coteau, Arnaudville, and even over into Cecilia in St. Martin Parish. And if you, for those familiar with the geography, if you took Highway 93 around, you'd do kind of a mini horseshoe and you tie back into the community of Scott by way of Campton in St. Landry Parish. Scott is actually doing very well. The interstate has treated it well. They've been very proactive towards the interstate. In many ways, Scott is doing very well. Arnaudville, if it weren't for George and Mavis, I don't know where Arnaudville would be today, honestly. I really don't. It's kind of scary to think of where it would be today. Sunset and Grand Coteau, getting there. Sleepy little towns that the world was passing by, but it's not passing them by, and they're getting it. But they're not going to get there on their own, and this is the point that we're leading to. Placemaking promotes collaboration and capacity building. We think of it as being amongst people that recognize the placemaking community and the concept of placemaking. What I'd like to propose to you, and I have to give a lot of credit to George, because it was George's idea that what if placemaking physical assets could help governments break down their boundaries? Does everyone know where Sunset and Grand Coteau is? This is just a sensible guy talking here. How in the world could Sunset and Grand Coteau not have consolidated governments? I don't know. I know St. Landry Parish pretty well, and I still don't know where the boundaries are. Those of you that think the interstate is a boundary between those towns, it's not. The interstate actually cut those towns in a very awkward way. So they're both on either side of the interstate. They duplicate all their services with that. One town has a great fire rating, one town has a terrible fire rating, one town has great water, one town has terrible water, and they're the same town, and they duplicate every single service. So this is some of the history that we deal with on collaboration and cooperation between communities. It hasn't been that way in the past, but it has to change. And I think that placemaking and where we're going with this specific initiative at St. Landry has the opportunity to do that. Who do boundaries matter to? You guys know that. Does anyone know that St. Landry Parish has 2 divided communities by parish? Part of Eunice is in Acadia Parish as well as St. Landry. Part of Arnaudville is in St. Martin Parish as well as St. Landry. It does matter to some of the people that live in those towns, but for the people that visit those towns, they have no idea what parish they're in and probably really don't care. The people that are paying taxes, it matters to, but by and large, people don't care. Politicians care. But if politicians are making decisions on behalf of political survival, then can we all agree it's probably not very good decisions, it's probably not very proactive, it's probably very reactive. So this is what we want to try to influence with placemaking. We had the way this specific, and I'm going to go into a few projects that we've done, the way this came up is really odd to me. The town of Sunset has a business alliance. And you would think, as a business alliance, business people would understand the need for collaboration and actually spreading their wings and their scope of influence. The Sunset Business Alliance didn't think that way at all. If you were in Grand Coteau, if you were in Opelousas, if you were in Arnaudville, you didn't want any part of that. Didn't want you coming into our business community, let alone people could visit two businesses, heaven forbid, make an experience, make a day out of it. So, in fairness, it's not just government, it's changing mindsets. But the government, like it or not, at the community, parish, and every other level, they're how things get done. They're how future resources are allocated. That's how planning happens when influencing the future look of these communities. What we've done along the corridor, and this is to a large extent George's idea, is what if we could identify physical placemaking assets that would break down the barriers of those communities. So whether it's that crazy border that I talked about between Sunset and Grand Coteau, whether it's the divide that kind of weaves itself in and out through Arnaudville, St. Martin, and St. Landry Parish, any political divide, does it really matter? Does it really matter to the placemaking? Does it really matter to businesses? Does it really matter to visitors? No, it really doesn't. Those borders really don't matter to them. One of the projects, and this was really the first project that made sense to do this, is a project that we looked at between Arnaudville and Grand Coteau, about halfway through. Guys, I'm going to be the first to tell you, this isn't exactly a culturally sensitive project. I mean, you can look at it. This is a heavy industrial project that we put right in the middle of a cultural sensitive area. Sorry, part of our job is to create jobs, right? So we did this, didn't have all to do with me, but we did bring it in. It is a good job creator. It's only been there about 3 years right now. George came up with the concept on this, breaking the divide, the history of Grand Coteau and Arnaudville. What if we have a project right in the middle that everybody can rally around? So all these massive concrete pipes that they have here, there's a call for artists out right now. The company has agreed to contribute with this and actually provide all the pipe at no cost, all the slight defective pipe at no cost, and move all the pipe at no cost. The call to artists will actually put a wall along Highway 93 with this pipe standing on its end. The uses of that pipe will promote art contests with students from around the area, around the state, and around the world. There's murals on those. A hanging garden project that will actually promote art, agricultural for high school students with gardens growing in those pipes. George also has a partnership that we're working with LSU, correct, on groundwater recycle through these pipe systems that go in there. What it does is it doesn't matter if it's Grand Coteau, it doesn't matter if it's Arnaudville, it takes the focus out of those communities, and we've taken both communities to look at a focus of a physical placemaking asset. Has that influenced the government? No, kinda, maybe. But I want to be realistic about this. We're not going to change political thinking in South Louisiana overnight. It's a process. It's a transformational change. And I think taking that focus off of the way it's been historically and giving people reasons to step outside their comfort zone and their boundaries is the way we're going to make that transformational change. The St. Luke's Hospital, I think some of you have heard about this, right? Or you've seen it already, I would think. This is really a transformational project. So now we're not talking necessarily, we could be talking about Sunset and Grand Coteau, because how many of the visitors are going to get off at exit 11 on I-49? Probably 80% or more that are going to come to visit. So does that mean that they're going to stop at the Chicory Cafe and grab lunch or breakfast on the way out? Does that mean that they're going to stop at antique shops? Yeah, it does. Sure they are. They're going to try to make a day out of that. This project and its repurpose into a cultural immersion campus is going to not only bring the communities together, but it's already broken down the barriers between St. Landry Parish and St. Martin Parish, because by nature, this was a joint project. It was co-owned between two parishes. We had to come together as parishes to come to an agreement. St. Martin Parish surrendered their ownership in this building. That was a long, difficult negotiation process, but it was a step. It broke down barriers. There wasn't a lot of historical, and I'm not picking at Guy Cormier, I'm not picking at Bill Fontenot, they're both friends. There wasn't a lot of historical cooperation. But this gives them something, this gives the political leadership something to hang their hat on. We made progress. We stretched those boundaries, and we're not really accustomed to doing those types of things. Has anybody seen this? Has anybody seen the old, what it used to be, is my understanding, the old cockfight, one of the premier cockfighting arenas in South Louisiana? Some of you may have seen it. I have to tell you, when I went into this facility, I had some really bad visions. I thought it was going to be like blood on the walls, and I mean, I think, I don't want to go in. That place is amazing. And you ought to see the inside of it. It's just really in great shape. Another cultural asset that, even though it belongs to the town of Sunset, remember we talked about the town of Sunset and Grand Coteau probably needing to be the same community anyway? Something that those political leaders can hang their hat on, that are going to bring people from beyond their boundaries, and it's going to generate money in their communities in an otherwise challenging time. It gives them a resource. It's a place, placemaking is part of a bigger picture, probably more than what you guys have been talking about now. Sunset as well. This project is actually, thought it was there. We're probably going to have to go to the state for a Type 2 charter with that. But the beautiful old building in Sunset, the old Sunset High School. This is going to be a K-4 French immersion campus. Thought St. Landry Parish Schools was going to take it as a Type 1 charter. It's moved to a Type 2 charter. Same thing. We're not just going to bring students in from St. Landry with this. We're going to bring students in from Upper Lafayette Parish, possibly Acadia, St. Martin Parish, as well as all of St. Landry. St. Landry Parish, by the way, is 1,000 square miles, so it's a big parish. Something else to break boundaries. So what I'd like to encourage you guys, because it's all something that, a world that you live in, and a world that's important to you, utilize this as a tool with your elected officials. Show them the importance of collaboration and bringing people in from the outside. If they're true politicians, show them that it's going to make them look good. Say, yeah, don't worry about the mayor of Grand Coteau. It's going to be all right. It's just going to make you look good. And I've got some mayors that are more progressive than others, but some of them are just really. Just won't go there. It's like any profession, though. You probably got a top 20%, bottom 20%, a bell curve in the middle, I would think, and that's probably the same with elected officials. So, I'd just like to emphasize, and I think I've just probably beat this horse to death, this placemaking and this effort that we have here in this region, and this isn't the only region in the country that's being successful, has a much more powerful impact on the future of this region than I think many people give it credit for. And to me, as the economic developer in the room, that powerful impact is getting our elected officials to think differently, and by thinking differently, it's getting them to break down their political boundaries. It's getting them to think about what's good for one community is good for another community, what's good for one parish is good for other parishes, and if I can bring more capacity through collaboration to my area, everybody's going to win. I mean, it seems pretty crazy. That should be a no-brainer, right? But I think placemaking, the cultural economy, takes such a neutral stance on the political nature of things, and I'm not suggesting, and I don't, you get in, you kind of put the gloves on occasionally with the political figures, and I guess that's necessary. I say I don't advocate that you do that, but maybe we need to do more of that. make people in and around the cultural economy and the placemaking in this region need to take more of a stance. I think Parish President Mayor Bourdeau has actually become very proactive towards the cultural economy, which is something I don't know that Lafayette Parish has seen. I'm not from this area, but I've never seen anything in the time that I've been in this region like that. So Bill Faulkner and St. Landry Parish is taking a very proactive stance towards the cultural economy. I think Guy Cormier is taking a very, and I'm not discounting any other parish presidents because I don't know specifically. We have police juries, as many of you know, and I don't know what some of their positions are on that. But I will tell you that this has taken hold at the parish level, and some communities have taken hold with this as well. So, tying up the whole topic of this can be more than just arts and culture. This can be influencers of the long term of getting our governments to stop thinking reactively, political decisions, and looking forward towards the future. And when you look at the future, you don't look right here. You look right here. That's where the future's at. If your future is right here and for your survival day to day, guys, I mean, we all know that's not a very productive stance of that. This has the ability to get them off of that thinking and change those mindsets. So, my thoughts, like I said, you're going to get Bill. I certainly respect if some of you, have questions or concerns around that. It's not an easy topic to discuss, really. We know we have a lot of challenges in our governmental leadership and processes at many levels, but we can't just say we got problems. We got to do something about them, and I think this is one of those tools that can actually do it. So, thank you so much for your time. I would certainly entertain any questions that anyone might have.
Questions, anybody? Questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
How did George convince you? Just by seeing the progress that happened in Arnaudville? I'd like the key words.
Remember I went back to that story about the Sunset Business Alliance? That Sunset Business Alliance actually evolved in what we call a placemaking task force that brought members together from all those communities, members of the business community together with that. And I think, I won't speak to George, but I think George saw kind of the stalemate of the history between the community of Grand Coteau and Arnaudville. I think it was kind of an organic thought. I won't put words in his mouth. I don't really know how that came about, but I'll let him share that with you.
So we challenged Bill with putting together a creative placemaking presentation and coming to Semaine de la Francophonie. And that was a trick. So that way he could actually learn about creative placemaking. So, I'm found out.
But he accepted to do it.
And he did a great job.
Who's got any other questions? Thoughts? Ideas? And?
I'd love, since there are some Vermilion Parish folks in the audience, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some of the tools that were used, like new legislation that's being proposed, economic development districts, like tools that you use to help make your communities cultural centers.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it goes back to being creative with local communities, particularly those that don't have a ton of resources. In fact, I don't know of any community of any size in Acadiana that is flush with cash. Lafayette Parish, Lafayette community, I mean, you can go to anyone, New Iberia, Abbeville, Opelousas, you can go to anyone like that. So when we look at from an economic developer, community developer's perspective, we have to look at the resources that are available and overlap those resources. So when you talk about economic development districts, which is something that we've actually been very proactive towards in St. Landry Parish, I hate to bring up the T word, but the tax word is an ugly word. Nobody wants to hear the tax word. But somebody's got to pay for the improvements that are made to our communities. And if they're accountable to specific projects, public officials are held accountable, goals are set, measurables are set, I think we can all agree that not doing nothing it's not going to change our community. So we've been very progressive with economic development districts and sales tax and strictly dedicating those monies back to improvements around transportation and other physical infrastructure assets. Cultural districts, of which we've got 3 that overlap the area that we're talking about. can provide another overlapping resource in that respect. We recently had, it was recently last Friday, we had a new program through the Trump administration that was just announced called Opportunity Zones. I don't know if any specific in Vermilion Parish. This is one.
Downtown Arnaudville.
Okay. We have 4 in St. Landry, 3 in Opelousas, 1 in Eunice that was created. The 3 in Opelousas overlap. What we've done is created a new downtown development district that has its own separate funding mechanism. And by the way, the entire I-49 through Opelousas is an economic development district with a separate governing board that has an independent funding source that right off the bat is going to generate about $1.5 million a year to invest along the frontage or along I-49 going through Opelousas. This week they start cutting the grass there. You say, big deal. They're going to cut the grass. What was 4 times a year, 16 times a year. Pick up the trash along I-49 in Opelousas. What was 6 times a year, that'll be 18 times a year. So when they're going to totally redo the overhead lighting throughout Opelousas, they've already started that process. New sewer treatment facilities north and south in Opelousas. So it's really getting government to think a little different, and which, you know, this is just a, I mean, I'm speaking your world. I know we could sit and talk about this all night, but you have to find ways to overlap resources. If you've got a Main Street, a Downtown Development Authority, a cultural district, now you bring into play historic rehabilitation tax credits, you bring in other mechanisms. This isn't easy work, guys, you know that. George knows that. It takes a lot to get this stuff done, and the more capacity that we can build in these initiatives by overlapping resources, by bringing people together, by using these placemaking as that conduit to bring them together, the better off we'll be with it. So we could talk about that a long time, but that's a short answer.
Right. I'll just bring it in.
Okay.
But it brings up a very your response brings up a very interesting point. Some of us think that cutting grass along the interstate 4 times a year is too many times. And so 16 times a year is even worse. So some of the things that some people view as a public good, some of us view as negative. You know,
that's coming from we are in agriculture, and that's coming from a soil building perspective.
Okay.
And
the health of the soil, the health of the environment,
and the health of the planet.
Well, I think where we came to this conclusion and agreement, and there was a lot of discussion around that, what would be suitable with that. And I think where this board, the governing authorities of those areas came to the agreement, and by the way, I share this, you never have a second chance to make a first impression. So when traffic gets diverted on I-10 around 190 and south on I-49, my goal is to say, wow, when you go through Opelousas, whether that's in the nighttime or the daytime. I'll tell you, last year, and I appreciate your perspective from an ag component of it. Last year, during the heavy growing season, there was literally grass that was growing in the interstate that was as tall as I was. You couldn't see around. It wasn't even safe. You couldn't see around the intersections with that. So that's where that's a thought. It's the first time I've ever heard that.
If you've driven north on 49 when the vetch is in bloom, they've got all that wonderful vetch planted along there. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity to look beyond what this initial looks like. I recently was in Central Florida and driving 10 through Florida. Beautiful job with their interstates in Florida. And some of the natural blooms that they have along there is just gorgeous with that. So I think this is a first step in a process. Next year we can look at other types of grooming and maintenance along that interstate corridor that would actually complement what that's already done. That's a good thought. I mean, the natural look does have a lot.
Yeah, well, he's got opportunity for creative placemaking.
So here's an opportunity for creative placemaking regarding the interstate system going through different communities. Everyone loves bees. Bees produce honey. They also produce wax, which you use to paint with. And caustic wax medium sells for about $22 a pound. That's good money for people, and it's a good market to develop. Bees need flowers. And so, those interstates could become, basically farm area for bees. Yeah, it dries, right. But it's the goal here is it's not just about planting plants because it looks good or it makes sense, because not everything happens just because it makes sense. There's an economic component connected to it, which is job creation. So it kind of completes the circle.
And the ditches, don't forget the ditches.
Right. That's what I'm talking about, in the ditches.
And the ditches.
And it also absorbs about 8 times the amount of rainwater. Is that correct?
Well, depending on how you manage it and what your grasses are, yeah.
So in regards to flooding.
Reduces flooding,
also helps address
exactly.
flooding issues as well.
Yeah.
So you bring them together and create a project.
Yeah, but now you have a district and a board that governs it and funding to do some of these plans.
And at the end of the day, I'm not going to stand up here and pretend that I or anybody else has all the answers. I mean, the idea is that building collaboration, but the big thing that we've done is we put a non-political board in place with quality board members that is funded to be able to do it. So if there are ideas on how to go forward with creative things, now the discussion is totally different. When we have money to work with, it's a different discussion other than conceptual discussions that you're always thinking, oh Lord, who's ever going to pay for this? So it just creates a different discussion around that. But so anyway, I'd be happy to hear ideas that you have about the I-49, because remember when I started this whole thing, I said it's built to a strength to a fault, build floats around up here a lot of the time, and that gets a lot of stuff done at that level, but it doesn't get down, no pun intended, in the weeds. Any other thoughts or questions or comments? Okay. Guys, thank you very much. This was really a nice turn.
I think we're ready to start again, and the talkative one is back. I wanted to tell you tonight at the Richard Sale Barn, the program had said 7, it's really 6. So, you know, we'll have some great food, some music, and we'll talk about the barn and things like that. But we want to do it as a fellowship and to come and experience the barn, but have a good time as well. So I was asked, just as a spur of the moment, to introduce Casey. I'm a new Casey Phillips fan. Met Casey a couple of years ago when I worked with Cultural Economy Foundation and Smoke-Free Baton Rouge. He was our program director for implementation and for the campaign, actually. Then became a fan of his force agency that he's had for 12 years. And became a sponsor of his Walls project this year through Smoke-Free Baton Rouge, and I have really come to learn how connected to the community he is, how connected he is to culture and artistic endeavors, and how to create all of that to make a community feel good about themselves and individuals, but as a community. And a community could be, you know, a block, 2 blocks, 4 blocks, whatever, but Casey Phillips.
Thank you, Kathy. So, first and foremost, because this is what you're supposed to do as a speaker, and I've never really done it, but thanks for the host of this nice place and for hosting French Week that's now evolving beyond just Arnaudville and continues to spread and get bigger. And I've already pledged my man love for George Marks. And but truly, you know, when I first moved back to Louisiana, I am from here, right? So that's important for whenever you're talking to people in Louisiana, they want to know if you're from there or not, and where you went to high school and where you went to church and all that stuff. So I am from Baton Rouge. I lived many years in New Orleans until the wash away. And after Katrina, we actually relocated our arts and entertainment company to Los Angeles to go swim in the deep blue ocean and 13 million people. And when it was a very humbling experience to be in a market that large that's doing so many things so fast. When I grew up in Louisiana, where sometimes it feels like we do so little so slow, right? And there's advantages to both. And I'm not being cheeky when I say that. I actually, I'll kind of come to that in my presentation. But that little magic spot in the middle, right? California does a lot of things that are on the cutting edge, and it's amazing. But a lot of things don't work. And so, but at least they try, right? And I said, and when I moved, you know, being in California and being immersed in the arts and culture scene out there, they were grappling with a lot of the same social issues that we are grappling with right here in Louisiana, that they do in Chicago, and they do in North Carolina. We have a lot of the same problems in our communities across the United States. And so I learned a lot out there. And so when I moved back to Baton Rouge in 2011, I kind of felt a little bit like an alien, right? I had left for so long that it was really hard for me as I moved back to my city and the areas. How many people have been to Baton Rouge with any kind of consistency here? Okay. All right, cool. So I'm 42. So when I grew up in Baton Rouge, North Baton Rouge, quote unquote, which is basically half our city, that's where everybody lived, right? And, well, Dal told me that I'm being boring and I need to hurry up and get to my slides. Sorry, I don't normally use Microsoft. Anyway, so as I came back to my city, what I didn't understand is the place where I grew up and where my grandma's house was, and I spent time walking to the high school and to the Krispy Kreme donut place, which was amazing when I was young. You know, as I drove back to my hometown, I saw the schools were closed, the businesses were closed, there was crime everywhere, and I couldn't figure out why. And so I spent like a solid 6 months asking the question, why? Just going to community meetings. I'd never been involved in nonprofit before. I'd never been involved in politics in any kind of way, shape, or form. And the more questions I asked and the more uncomfortable those questions became, what became very clear to me was that there was a lot of things that people simply did not want to address. And they were things that needed to be talked about, because if we couldn't come to the truth, we certainly couldn't come to a point of reconciliation. We couldn't heal, and we certainly couldn't transform, right? So we started the Walls Project. All right. So there you go. So the Walls Project was an attempt in 2012 to unite artists, business leaders, municipal leaders, churches, and activists together around projects to engage in very uncomfortable conversations and deal with issues that have been buried pretty much for centuries, but definitely in the last 100 years in our city. That's what we started the Walls Project as. And the first project that we started was painting murals. I didn't know a darn thing about painting murals. I feel you. I do. I feel your pain. And I didn't think it would be that hard. I mean, I was walking around the streets of San Francisco and Los Angeles, saw all this beautiful public art, and in my mind I was like, hey, we'll raise some money, we'll paint a couple of murals. I will admit now, because we're about to come up on our 100th mural, and actually that's being painted by Robert Dafford, as a matter of fact, ironically enough. The first 3 murals were going to be controversial. They were going to deal with issues around race, sexism, and incarceration. And we pretty much figured that I would be run out of town on the horse that I came in on, Baton, because I'm from there. And we would then hand off our mural project to the Arts Council, and then we would then kind of get down into the dirtier work, right, on a community level, and really start addressing these problems. But I got some amazing advice from a culture maker, Derek Gordon. I don't know if anybody ever had the gift of getting to know this man, but he was the head of the Arts Council in Baton Rouge, but before that, he was also the head of the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and the Lincoln Center in New York, and he lived back in Baton Rouge, and he went back home to basically be with his family as he transitioned off this planet. And he gave me some amazing advice. He was like, the last thing in the world that artists in Louisiana need is to be further marginalized by the conservative business community and the social circles inside of our state. We need to infiltrate, we need to be invited in, and we need to be a part of city planning. We need to be a part of economic development. And we need to be at the table, and if you go and if you keep walking around telling people that they're stupid with a sledgehammer, they're going to punch you back, and it's going to further marginalize people. So the first mural that we painted was colorful squares. And the second one was triangles with butterflies. And the third one was a parade scene. And lo and behold, he was right. Everyone got behind the Walls project. Everything was, you know, the business community, the municipal leaders, they loved how people came together to create public art together. They loved the idea that the public art could be a safe space when properly facilitated to deal with some of our hardest issues that we've been running from for decades and centuries. And they liked it because it was a safe space, and even the politicians liked it because they could engage in these conversations and it wouldn't hang them too far out to dry, because if anybody didn't like what was happening with the art, they're just like, just go blame the artist people. And so that is the beginnings of the Walls project, but that's not our evolution. So what I just handed you in your hand to us on behalf of my board and over 25,000 volunteers over the last 6 years later is a blueprint that we believe can be used in communities no matter how small and how large, not only in the state of Louisiana, but in the Gulf South, to do the change from within, to make it feel indigenous, to make it for the people, by the people, and for the people. So, in case you haven't noticed, I'm very opinionated, and there is a certain idealism behind our organization. However, as the nonprofit has evolved, it's not really about idealism, and it's not really about change for the sake of change. It's about what we're all collectively capable of together. But we got to do things together. You can use projects to work together, and to do that with, you know, in creative placemaking. So, we create, we cultivate, and we reactivate. That's the three areas of our programs. As I mentioned before with Create, that's our public art murals, right? We do some sculpture, but mainly we do murals, and that's what people know us for in our Create programs. Our Cultivate programs I'm going to get to in just a second, which is our education and workforce development through the arts. And then last but not least, what I think is absolutely, starting in January of 2019, something this community and all the surrounding communities can start doing is our Reactivate programming, and that's what I'll end my presentation with. So there's Mr. Dapper. Has anybody seen this mural as you drive over the bridge? Right?
Right.
And then this one right here is an example of project-based learning murals, which if there's any educators in the audience, I can talk to you a little bit further afterwards about that. But what you'll notice about these murals is that this is in a neighborhood that's, you know, one of the oldest and most historic African-American neighborhoods. And as I said, it was actually inspired by a Matisse exhibit that was in New York. And then this is right there in Old South Louisiana. Colorful, vibrant. These are things that spawn economic development. If an area feels blighted and feels deactivated, it's very hard, as all the people know here trying to get with economic development, it's very hard to get people to rally around that. So we are very intentional about our murals. Not only do we engage the community before we paint, we use this, we look at all these plans, like Ms. Carroll, God, what a fabulous job they've done over the last 20 years. There are so many plans, there are so many planning meetings about planning to plan more meetings in Baton Rouge. It's dizzying, right? We have so many plans on the shelf. Pull them off the shelf, show them to the community activists, and let's start getting some work done. So we're very intentional about where we paint our murals so that we know where federal, state, and local dollars are going for sewage improvements, for road improvements. They're trying to renovate schools, and there's either, you know, tax districts, and wherever it is that the local officials and the local economic development councils are going, we go in there with them in partnership with the churches and in partnership with the community organizations and start to revive those buildings before the investment actually hits the ground. So we want more people who are late on the bandwagon to get on the bandwagon and want to reinvest in the areas that have been divested over the years. All right, so here's our results, right? Does anybody here work in the nonprofit sector? Okay, so impact studies. How much time do you spend on doing impact studies with your nonprofits?
Years.
Years, right? These impact studies are not only, I used to look at it as part of the dog and pony show to get grant funding. But once I matured as a leader of a nonprofit, and I'll own that part with thank God for my board, what it really does, it gives you a really good gauge of whether your programs are working or not. Because just because you want to do the good work, maybe you're not the right organization to do that work, right? And you need to really ask yourself that. If, in fact, the dollars that you are utilizing and you're putting on the ground, are they making a difference? And when I look at some of, a couple of these things, but specifically that top one, visual artist in Baton Rouge, George lived there for a while. Visual artist in Baton Rouge, and arguably across the state, may be one of the most underutilized resources in the cultural economy that we have in the state. I don't know if people really understand. My wife is a visual artist. Do you know how much a painting is? However much I tell you it is, right? There are very few industries in this world and verticals in this world where literally market demand drives your price point. And there's a very much more sophisticated way of going about it with galleries and whatnot. But there are incredibly, incredibly talented visual artists in New York and Los Angeles and Miami, and everybody gets all excited for the big art conferences. But guess what? Louisiana they are literally sprinkled across the state. And if you have a business and you're asking one of these visual artists to paint the sign on the front of your building in exchange for a lunch tab, shame on you. Shame on you. You need to pay people for what they are worth. And as artists, if you're willing to paint that logo in the front for exchange for some country fried steak and mashed potatoes, triple shame on you. Know your own value, because nobody is going to value you in this. Nobody is going to value you until you value yourself, right? So that $1 million in economic development is a big deal. We have specifically targeted stopping the creative brain drain in our region. Because if the creative people who are visual artists and who are muralists and creatives leave, all we're left to are basically people who don't think creatively and continue to implement the same solutions to the same problems. Folks, this is how I really wanted to start this conversation. I kind of thought that Bill Rodier set a certain kind of tone with his talk. Let me build on it. We are in crisis. We do not have the luxury of hanging back in the cut and waiting things for slowly to change. We are literally at the bottom of every single list. 45 to 50 is not something to be proud about. We are in a sense of crisis. Floods are wrecking our economy, and we're gearing up for probably one of the worst storm seasons ever in 2018. What are we going to do to keep bouncing back? Are we going to keep asking the federal government for dollars? Are we going to keep asking the federal government to fix our school system when we consistently test at the bottom of the nation? We have got to get off our ass collectively and make change and take some chances. Don't have to be California. We just need to stop being Louisiana. Because nothing's going to change with moving like this and shuffling and looking from the bottom all the way back up to the top. I tell people with our youth program, which I'm going to get to right now, 22nd. My goal is number 22. If we can move from 50th in the country in education to 22, I will literally run down the streets naked. I'll be the happiest dude in the world. If we can just get to the middle of the pack. I have a 14-year-old son that has to be educated in this state, right? We need to create opportunities for everybody in this state. And starting with our kids, we have that obligation. So our Cultivate programming, that's right, I'm just going to keep the idealism. I'm not going to even be sorry about it. So we train today's youth for the jobs of tomorrow. So this is a fancy way of saying that we are working with underserved kids, 6th through 12th grade, in Baton Rouge and in the surrounding parish. And we are working with them on Saturdays at 2 college campuses and providing intensive workforce training for the jobs of the future that all involve technology in the center. I think that he asked a while ago if we have any politicians in the House. Do y'all realize that last year in our legislative, they passed a bill to make it mandatory to start teaching cursive again in schools in 8th grade? We still don't have a state policy for computer literacy. I stood up very respectfully in the committee and asked if there's going to be a bill this year to start teaching the abacus, mandatory as well. There's, of course, I am an English writing major. I like to create calligraphy. I think it's beautiful. But what in God's name are we training our kids for if we don't even have basic computer science baked into the curriculum, not even in Jumpstart yet, right? So we are taking a disruptive model. We're not waiting for the curve to catch up. We're just doing it. So we have created a program called the Futures Fund. We are teaching on Saturdays, 26 out of the 52 weeks a year on Southern's campus at the RCC Mid-City. And we're teaching kids front-end and back-end computer training. Excuse me, I get emotional when I get really, my voice cracks when I get really passionate because, God, it's like you look at these kids, man, they're brilliant, and they're going to schools that are completely failing them. Completely failing them. But actually not failing them, they're just passing them to the next grade. Someone else's problem, right? And we're working with these students on Saturdays to teach them how to code because STEM jobs involving coding start at $72,000 a year. The neighborhoods where we recruit from, the median income in Old South Baton Rouge and in Scotlandville is $13,000 per household, right? And it's like we're trying to teach kids how to do cursive writing so they can fill out a report. It's a minimum wage job. We're teaching them now the creative arts, photography, music production, entrepreneurship. And we're teaching them this on Saturday, and as they put in 120 seat hours for Carnegie credit, they then graduate into our work study program. If students are above the age of 14 in the state of Louisiana, they can get paid because we have those awesome laws on the books, the law from the agricultural times, right? And so students can start getting paid at 14 years old, and we start them at $15 an hour, and we have them work on real-world projects where they're interfacing with clients. So to be less abstract, in our coding program, we have a 16-year-old young man right here, project manager, coder, graphic designer. That's my son, just because I want him to hang out and do photography. And I said, this is one of the lead graphic designers, and they're working on a $2,500 website. They get paid $15 an hour because that's what the minimum wage should be. That's a living wage. And if they hit their project on time, then they get bonused out. And now they know how to do a job where they can charge $1,500 to $3,500 on their own at any time and be able to economically empower themselves from the age 14, 15, and 16. That is the power of work. Everybody's like, oh, it's all about the kids. Okay? What are you doing? Like, what opportunities, what amount of your time in your week are you working to create opportunities for kids that don't have those opportunities? If you're not, how are we going to change the calculus of being dead last? It's not going to be a fast change. We know it's going to be a slow change because that's just how democracy and society evolves. But what are you doing right now to really change the calculus of economic opportunity? So, advancing underserved communities forward with arts-integrated education, jobs, and the technology market. My friends, here's the deal. As artists, we have such an amazing understanding of the art of hustle. The art of hustle. And if people would have taught all the artists in this room how to do the business side of the creative economy at a young age, at 15, 16, and 17, imagine where you would be in your 40s. Imagine how many companies, many galleries you could have probably opened. Your own music production studio. You could have, all the different things, your own digital web development firm. Think of all the jobs you would have created, right? Small business cultivation, that's the key to our economy. And when Bill was talking about small towns potentially being left behind, I'm not really going to speak to that, because like for us, we have, as an arts organization, our biggest partnership is a 5-year MOU with 4-H Louisiana. That's our most strategic partner, because they work with 235,000 students every single year in the state of Louisiana. And guess what? Most of them don't live in cities. Most of them live in the rural parishes. So my question is to the people in the cities, do those kids deserve less opportunities? Should they not get the same chance to be able to be part of the future economy? And of course, because 4-H is an amazing organization, been around for 105 years, all we're doing is baking our curriculum into what they're already doing, and bam, I don't need to start a nonprofit in Minden, Louisiana. There's already too many nonprofits. Work with the nonprofits who are already doing the work, who are already working with the kids, do what you do, bottle that magic, train them up, and get it out there. So, in cultivating future economic development, I'll go off on a tangent, so I'm going to stop on that. All right, so the immediate challenge is this. Every single one of us that lives in this, lives in this state, but is in this room, whether it's South Monroe, North Lake Charles, North Baton Rouge, the LaPlace Coterie in Lafayette, wherever the white hipsters from Brooklyn haven't moved to in New Orleans yet, every single city in our state has parts of the city that have been systematically divested. We can all talk about how we got to that point, and if I had to guess in this room, we'd probably all have a lot of different various opinions. Let's not talk about that. Just for 4 days. And on the 4 days around MLK, on the MLK Day in January, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, put your swords down, stop throwing rocks at each other. Churches, nonprofits, schools, municipal leaders, business communities, everybody's got those service hours they have to give. Everyone come together, concentrate in the parts of town that are blighted, that need the help, that need the love, and everyone come together and work on them for 4 days and watch what happens. So our Reactivate program is built on George Marks' duct tape and string. You don't have to have a lot of money to pull off magic, at least for the first couple of years, right? So what we are now built up to, we're in our 4th year of the MLK Day. I don't know if y'all remember last January in the very first part, but the average temperature was about 15 degrees. It was raining a lot. It was brutal. But when you start something, you gotta finish it, right? And so we went out on historic scenic highway, got it closed for 2 miles, in part, and thanks to Smoke-Free Louisiana's contribution. We got it closed, we got the police to rope off on both sides to make it safe for pedestrians, and we brought out 133 organizations over 4 days. Let me repeat, 133 organizations. We don't know if we hit our 10,000 people mark. Honestly, I know our brochures say that we do. I don't think that's actually true because it was freezing on Friday and Saturday. But on Monday, there were 4,500 to 5,000 people that just checked in. Everyone collectively came out. They gardened, they picked up blight, they primed buildings, they painted buildings, we did some murals, and I said, and we reactivated all the civic associations who were already in the neighborhood of Scotlandville and around Southern University to lead the project. Let me say this again. If you don't live in a neighborhood and you don't have a business in a neighborhood, learn where the back seat is in the power of not trying to be in control of something where you don't live. Know your place. And it doesn't mean that you can't do the work. What you do is you put the people who live there, who've been doing civic associations for 25 and 30 years, and sometimes generations of people who've been mayors in some of these cities, and you get behind them and you support and you bring the resources in, and you put your logo at the bottom. Have y'all ever noticed that about NUNU and George? You ever notice that their logo
is at the top?
Not
Oh, you killed me this time. You're usually
That's because I designed.
That's because Jackie did it. Love
That's
Jackie.
right, he always does
But what's
that.
awesome about George is, and I'm sure y'all figured this out, well, there's a couple of things to his strategy, and he's not saying this. This is my hypothesis. First of all, if you don't put your logo out front and anything goes sideways, it's a lot easier not to get like the rocks thrown at you. But the second thing is, it's respect. It's a respect thing. It's you respect all the other people, man, who have come before you, who are also doing the work. It's not about your damn logo. It's about, do you want to do the work? We've painted almost 100 murals. Our logo for the Walls Project is not on one piece of art. People have no idea who does those murals, except the artist's signature that's at the bottom. And guess who gets called to do more work? The artist. It's not about us. It's about creating the opportunity, and it's about doing the work. So, that's actually a PG version of how I usually talk. But with that being said, thank you for the time, thank you for the space to be able to kind of like speak our truth. The Walls Project, look, I'm not volleying to come into every city in Louisiana. We'd love to partner with you. We have a partnership with the Louisiana Endowment of Humanities and 4-H and the Smithsonian, and we're going to be painting 6 murals in rural parishes across the state. We do have the ability to partner with local communities, but what we really have the ability to do is say, here's our playbook. George Marks has given us a ton of institutional knowledge when we first started our organization. We pay that forward. I'm happy. I'm a little difficult to get on the phone, I'll be honest. But I said, you can email me, and my AI assistant will automatically put you on, on the calendar, and we can literally have a conversation. So I spoke for a really long time. Do I have time for questions, or do I need to get off the stage?
You have 10 minutes, 5 minutes for questions.
Oh, okay.
I'll give you 5 minutes.
Thanks, Jackie, by the way. That's the boss right there. All right. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me, that's the way that you get a hold of me. Does anybody have any questions? Comments? Preferably, if you don't agree with something I said, I would love to engage in some dialogue. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to add a little footnote of something I'm doing in my really tiny little rural community where I live. I'm now living there full time. We have 26 kids in a graduating high school class, and we live on a trunk highway where these huge, pipeline carrying trucks and oil trucks come through, because they're avoiding the weight. I mean, it's really kind of, and most of our storefronts are closed in our town.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, I've been studying arts and culture for a while, and I decided that I would, we have a community club, and usually they just have a gun raffle and a steak fry, and then a little parade. That's what they do. Mm-hmm. I went to the community club meeting. I said, how about if we have a silent auction and a variety show along with their steak fry, and the silent auction will showcase the artists in our community. We'll ask them to each give us something, and the definition is low. You have to design it yourself and make it yourself, and it has to be one of a kind. That's all. Okay. And if you do contribute something, we do a little poster of you with a picture of you and something that's about you and the work that you're doing. We have a 91-year-old woman who's doing rag rugs. We have a lot. I go to school. I go to every art class. I go to every music class and so on to recruit people. And last year we made $1,377 on our silent auction and gave a lot of artists visibility. And we always have a featured artist every year as well. And the variety show is 3 hours long, and we have to keep everybody to 3 minutes. You have to come to a rehearsal the night before so we can see what you're doing. Then you peak to 3 minutes. How our music? We have some great musicians who are doing the sound system or play keyboard, and so I can write a program up for the next night. And it's been spectacularly successful. And I feel like it's just a first step. I mean, what you're doing is so much. And I just thought, 4-H, I should go to the 4-H people and ask them.
They're so rad.
This year, but
it's in their charter.
And I know we can do some murals in our community. We have 2 gay men who moved into our community. One of them grew up there, and they're going to open a restaurant with a little farmer's market, and they're going to have a place for sound and music. And they already won the little local election for a liquor license that would compete with our muni bar. But so it's very inspiring what you're doing, and I'm going to take some of these ideas and go with it. So thank you so much.
And who would have thought, right, that I came from the private sector in the music industry.
Yeah.
And never had worked in nonprofit. I'd like to fancy myself as somewhat of a social capitalist, right? Like we always had nonprofit partners for our concerts. But I was there to make money. And when I moved back and I was trying to figure out how to run a nonprofit and specifically do this thing that y'all took out of the ethos and created a word around creative placemaking, who would have thought when you sat down at that computer and probably alienated friends and family for years as you toiled away at that, and then it finally got ordained and made its way to all of us. Who would have thought? And see, that's the thing. You never know. It's shade trees, my friend. If you're in this for the glory and to get the pat on the back, you're in the wrong planet. You're in the wrong business. It's like you never know what the ripple effect of your positive actions will be, and it's just awesome to finally get to meet you and tell you thank you, because all I had to do was read your blueprint. Like, that's all I had to do, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I can go talk to the suits now, put on my white guy outfit. This is my white guy outfit, by the way. And anytime I need to raise money, this is what I look like.
I want to say that, it was really Joan Shigekawa was the deputy NEA director, and Ronald Anderson, the director, that, called me and invited me to Washington and said, we want to create this new Our Town program. Would you, write a framing piece? And then I went from there, my co-author and the other two. And we just said, well, we can't do it without going out and seeing who's really done things. And our Arnaudville case study, and we had to do it by phone. We had 5 months, we didn't have enough money, we couldn't go see these things. We had to do it by phone. And our Arnaudville study has been the most successful one, because there's so many places that look to it, because it's so brilliant how it's been in George and Albany Davis and all the other people who put it together. So it's amazing, the cross-fertilization in ways you wouldn't think.
And in this work, if rejection is kind of part of it. I'm very familiar with the Our Town program. It's amazing to have a nice stack of rejection letters from them. And I said, and you can't stop. Like, you can't stop. Like, you have to continue to go forward. And, if Mavis isn't here, oh yeah, she is, Katie Mavis. And it's just like, it's not, I'll just deflect off George for a second. You look at just this last decade plus that what y'all been able to accomplish, but really, in all honesty, the people who are your peers in the room and what makes you kind of like want to cry is myself, right? Like, truly, is the setbacks and the difficulties in the total from afar, I'll say it, I don't live in the parish, the idiocy of y'all city councils in getting in the way of progress, and the sheer intestinal fortitude and perseverance of y'all's organization. Trust me, my friends, we watch from afar, and when you have that taste of concrete in your mouth from getting slammed to the ground with failure, and you read about what y'all are doing and continue to fight, you get back up, you look at the pictures of those kids, and you get back in the office at 4 in the morning, and you drink coffee, and you grind until you drop. So I said, truly, that's what creative placemaking is. It's the absolute refusal to take no for an answer. Yes, ma'am.
A question and a statement. First is a question. How many years did you say the Walls Project?
6. We're in our 6th year.
6th year.
Mm-hmm.
And second thing is, my husband Johnny and I were fortunate to be with Floyd Saunier. Many of you know him. He's a wonderful pen and ink artist. And we were in France with him, and this gentleman walked up to his painting and he said, "Oh, that's too expensive." And Floyd, who was just the most kindest person ever, he said, "No, it's not too expensive. You just can't afford it." And it was so kind, because it was the value of his work. It was what he valued. And maybe to you it was too expensive, but it was, the value of his work. And the other thing, not only visual arts, but I produce a lot of events with musicians, and I tell people musicians should never play for free. It's even benefits. You ask musicians to play for a benefit, he still has to buy his groceries, so maybe a small stipend, to give him. And a lot of times the band leader can play for free, but he's got to pay his band. So again, musicians should never play for free, and artists' work or what they are valued
Going back
at.
to Floyd Saunier, what my response is when I get that is, I know I can't afford it either.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's everybody's favorite question. And oh my God, if you're guilty of this, just put your head down. I'm not going to ask you to say it out loud. Never ask an artist how many hours it took them to do something. Like, that is like, it not only is disrespectful, but it literally shows your lack of culture. So please don't ever do that. Yes, sir.
I wanted to just add.
I feel like I'm getting more popular as I sit here in front.
In our silent auction, we asked every artist to put a price, a minimum price. The members of my committee said, no, we shouldn't do that because it might not go at all. I said, that's their choice. The point is to convey to people how valuable it is. And also, it's up to the person to decide, where they want to put it, whether they want to make a part contribution or not. So.
Yeah, there's other ways to raise money besides asking artisans. That's probably the biggest takeaway that I've learned from the relationship with our partners in France is that culture isn't a commodity. It's life and it's community. And Marco, like, man, I really had a hard time understanding this. So it's like, as an older guy, right? Like, all you have to admit when you're wrong is just say, I was wrong about that. And Marco really showed to me, if what you're creating isn't helping the community, what are you doing? What are you doing? And so for us, every single public piece of public art, every single class that we offer, the first question we ask, to what end? What is this going to accomplish? Because, and sir, I don't know you, but it's like if you were kind enough to cut someone, it cut me a $1,500 check that was even 25% of a particular art project, and I told you after like 90 days, and you were just like, what happened to that project? I'm like, we're still kind of figuring it out. You don't want to hear that from me. It's like, as a nonprofit and as an artisan, hold yourself to the same standards that business people do, as business women and businessmen do, and conduct yourself like a business entity. People will respect it and they will support it because you've earned that respect. You're not just given it, right? Yeah, sorry.
For our small workshop will be Miss Audrée. Bourdeau. Comme ça. And she came to us through a Logique program, and she spent 3 months?
No, 5 weeks.
5 weeks.
Explain what Logique is a little bit.
Well, I'll let Audrey explain that.
Okay.
Merci, George. Yes, since we are in the Semaine de la Francophonie, I decided to do all my presentation in French. Alors, vous allez comprendre très bien l'accent québécois après seulement 15 minutes, n'est-ce pas merveilleux? Qui a compris ce que je viens de dire? Levez la main. Ah, c'est bon, 3 personnes. I said that I will do my presentation all in French, but it's not true. I'll do As George said, I came 2 years ago at NUNU with an internship program with Logique. Logique is les Offices Jeunesse Internationaux du Québec. It's a non-profit organization in Quebec who do partnerships with lots of Francophone countries, and they pay for people to go there with the special programs. And yeah, so I've been selected, and I was very happy to go to NUNU pour 5 semaines. Et donc, quand j'étais au NUNU, well, I'm kind of sad because Martin and
they should be coming.
Yeah, they should.
Where are they?
We have Francophone friends, so I just want to wait for them. Parce que je vais faire ma présentation en français, especially pour eux. Donc, je vais juste les attendre 2 minutes. Mais en attendant, I'm a kind of professional artist from Quebec, and I do face painting, and I do lots of volunteer work in my community, and I also work in a non-profit organization in Quebec who's called Pour un réseau actif dans nos quartiers. In English it might be for a network in the quarter. And, ok, je vais commencer ma présentation maintenant que mes amis sont arrivés. Alors, today I'm going to talk about 2 projects. I did one in Quebec and one in Arnaudville. Je vais parler de 2 projets que j'ai fait de mural, un ici à Abbey, pas ici à Arnaudville, mais à Arnaudville, et un au Québec. C'est 2 projets qui ont 5 ans de différence dans le temps, mais qui sont très similaires dans la façon qu'on le fait. These 2 projects have been done 5 years in the time lapse, but they are kind of the same type of project. So I call my presentation The Power of Murals. And the first one I'm going to talk is the old school shed in Saint-Chrysostome. Le premier projet de mural que j'ai fait, en fait, le vrai premier que j'ai fait, c'est une vieille cabane à l'école primaire où moi j'ai été à Saint-Chrysostome. Saint-Chrysostome, c'est un petit village de 2600 habitants dans le sud du Québec. Et moi j'ai été à l'école primaire là toute ma vie et il y avait une vieille shed qu'on dit, en fait quand mes parents étaient petits, c'était la cabane de Baton. This shed was the place where the people put their skate to go on the skate rink. So it's pretty old, and when I was a kid, we were saying that there was a monster in that shed, so it needed lots of love. So, c'est tout brun, c'est pas très beau, c'est en train de tomber. As you can see, it's almost fell apart. And I started my artist career back then. I was 25 years old. J'ai commencé ma carrière artistique à ce moment-là. Et j'étais pas très connue dans mon village, donc je voulais faire un projet pour que les gens me connaissent et que les gens comprennent que je suis capable de mettre des projets en marche. So, I've been to the school, I've been to the town, and I asked them, can I do a mural with the kids and all the community? Because I started my artist career and I wanted to be known. I know that the men before me told us that if you don't get paid, shame on you. I wasn't paid, but I'm not ashamed because for me it was a way to give back to my community. I do lots of volunteer work and for me it was just normal. But I would never do that project again, not have more jobs and more contracts. But back then it was good for me. Ce que je viens de dire, c'est que quand j'ai commencé le projet, c'était juste bénévolement. Mais ça vaut beaucoup plus que d'être payé, de ne pas être payé. Donc, mais pour moi, c'était correct de ne pas être payé pour faire ce projet-là parce que je voulais être connue, je voulais que la communauté comprenne qui j'étais. Mais maintenant que j'ai un petit peu plus de travail en tant qu'artiste, je ne ferai plus ce projet-là gratuitement. Mais à ce moment-là, c'était correct pour moi. So, I went to every classroom of the primary school. J'ai été dans toutes les classes de l'école et j'ai demandé aux enfants de faire des dessins de ce qu'ils aimeraient avoir sur la murale. I've asked every kid to draw the things that they wanted to see on the mural, thinking that it's for the community, it's not for you. If you draw a Spider-Man, I might not paint it on the mural. Alors les enfants ont tous dessiné quelque chose qu'ils aimeraient avoir. Et ensuite, j'ai fait un gros dessin qui représentait la plupart de ce qu'ils voulaient. So then I put back together all the things that they drew, and I kept, like the flowers, one type of flowers one kid did, and then the clouds. So I tried to keep the exactly drawing of the kids to make one drawing. J'ai essayé de garder les vraies formes, les vraies couleurs de tous les enfants. And then I've asked for a community worker business to help me to rebuild some stuff in the shed. As you can see, the window was in wood, so it was all, c'était tout bon. Donc j'ai demandé à des gens de venir m'aider, tous gratuitement. Quand c'est plein de petits travails comme ça, ben les gens, ils sont d'accord pour venir aider. Ça a pris 2 heures à Hugo. It took only 2 hours to Hugo to do that work, but for me it will not take all the day. So people send me, okay, Audrey, we'll help you. And these are the firefighters of the community. They help me to wash it and to paint it. Ça, c'est les pompiers volontaires de la municipalité qui ont aidé pour laver et pour peindre. They had lots of fun. And then the kids help. Your wages. Aren't they pretty? Alors, les petits-enfants nous ont aidés à peindre toute la murale. And it wasn't acrylic paint. It was very hard. And as you saw that the shed was on the concrete, it was very hot, so it was kind of hard to do. Alors, les petits-enfants nous ont aidés à peindre. Ça a pris toutes les classes ont eu un petit moment pour peindre. Il y avait à peu près 200 enfants. There was 200 kids in the school, and they all got their time to paint with me. Even if it wasn't very good sometimes. And they all put their hand on one side of the building. Ils ont tous mis leurs mains quelque part sur, comme vous pouvez voir. Oh, isn't it pretty? Oh, that's my favorite part. Ça, c'est ma partie préférée de la murale avec l'école et l'église, the church. In our town, we have a very beautiful church, so for me it's important to remember all the past.
Et la musique?
Pardon?
La musique?
Oui, la musique. J'aime beaucoup la musique. Oh, and I did a fire. I didn't remember. I did a fire. Un camion de pompiers. So yeah, it looks like that. Oh. And the second project is Flame Project, a primary school in Baton Rouge. C'est une école d'immersion française à Baton Rouge. Et quand j'ai appliqué pour aller au NUNU, en fait, c'était pour ce projet-là. When I applied to go to NUNU, it was especially for that project, which George and Jill and maybe other people que je sais pas, avaient commencé déjà. Donc, Jill is a professional artist in Baton Rouge. She does volunteering stuff at Flame School. Jill fait du bénévolat à l'école Flame pour apprendre le français. Et un des projets que Jill voulait faire avec les élèves de 6e année, c'était à propos des fruits. Donc, the kids had to learn the fruits in French. So they drew the fruits and they put the words, you know, la banane, les oignons, you understand, huh? And back there, George took the community in Arnaudville to get involved in. George a été chercher des entreprises de Arnaudville pour participer au projet, pour payer le matériel, to pay the furniture, and to put the mural somewhere. So all that stuff, all that job I wasn't involved in. My part was to paint the fruit that the kids did. And the panels, that was the panels was made by Landry, who is a volunteer at NUNU. Alors, ça, c'est au studio de Jill, une Baton Rouge. J'ai passé quelques jours avec elle pour peindre les fruits. Donc, unfortunately, I don't have pictures of the fruits because I didn't have lots of time to put the pictures because I'm working in Quebec and I'm on a trip right now, so I didn't have the time to do a good presentation. Alors, j'ai pas beaucoup de photos de les dessins que les enfants ont fait parce que j'avais plus ou moins le temps de le faire. Mais vous pouvez voir que we kept pretty much the same colors and the same shapes that the kids did. And these are our favorites to Jill and me. Ça, c'est nos préférés qu'on aimait beaucoup. C'est au NUNU. Donc, la banane, le maïs, les carottes, l'oignon. And then all these together, ça a été mis sur le mur de C.A. Guidry, a fruit market in Arnaudville. And I guess they put money in the project. ils ont payé aussi pour faire partie du projet, pour payer le matériel et tout ça. And the kids from Flame, they came to la Semaine française 2 years ago to participate. Donc les enfants sont venus à la Semaine française à Arnaudville pour participer à des activités. And they went for a visit the piece of art they kind of made. And they were very proud of it, and I am too. And at my work, we do lots of collective garden. On fait beaucoup de jardins collectifs à mon travail. Et j'ai beaucoup de personnes qui veulent faire ce projet-là maintenant in Quebec. They want me to reproduce the same type of project in Quebec. They didn't do it yet, but maybe. So in both cases, dans les deux cas, on a eu la participation d'artistes professionnels, Jill and I in Québec. On a eu la participation des enfants de l'école, la participation d'experts, by expert I mean the firefighter or people who build la fenêtre de bois. And we got financial support from the community. Maybe in the future, the financial support from the community will be more accessible to pay the artist, but for now, it's a first step. And for me, in my city, St. Chrysostome, it's not a city, it's a village. In my village in St. Chrysostome, I started to ask the town if I can get a little bit money to do some project. J'ai commencé à demander à mon hôtel de ville si je peux recevoir un peu d'argent pour des projets que je veux faire artistiques, de médiation culturelle. Et peut-être plus tard, je vais demander, maintenant je veux plus faire de bénévolat. Maybe later I'll just say, volunteering is done for me, in other fields maybe, but for the art, it's done for me because I need to get paid for my work. And probably it will come. I put a seed in their brain. So that's all for me. That's all. I don't have any pictures yet. Et si vous voulez me parler, je suis disponible. Et sinon, thank you, George, for welcoming me. As I said, I was more on a vacation trip with my boyfriend, but to pass the day and to be invited, d'être invité à parler, mais je suis bien contente de ça. Puis je remercie George pour ça. Puis je vous souhaite une belle journée à tous.
Merci à tous.